What is it that all of us would like to have in our lives? These are some things that come to my mind. These are kingpin issues in philosophy in general, by the way, and in religion. I do believe. First, I think what we most want is respect for ourselves. And by this, I mean we want to feel that we've done the best that we can given what we were handed in life. This is intimately tied then, I believe, to the topics of shame, guilt, regret. Next, I believe we want to be able to trust our minds, what we perceive, what we think in terms of logic, even our memories. Dr. Nathaniel Branden has talked of this extensively when he wrote on self-esteem. Another kingpin issue for many, not everybody, is the topic of how much knowledge we know and the certainty of it. I think psychiatrists, Freud, so on, have referred to this as a desire for omniscience, to know all. In common parlance, we'd say so-and-so is a know-it-all if they crave to know everything in the area I would call a philosophy of life. In Europe, they used to call it the Weltanschauung, to know all about the essentials talked of in philosophy, religion, sociology, but not electrical work in one's home, plumbing, car repair, and so on. We deem that we can hire someone out to come in and do this for us. But on these kingpin philosophical issues of how best to be happy overall, many a person, I believe, wants to believe they know it all. In other words, that they're omniscient about these areas of life. And of course, then, this being the source of much animosity back and forth in the areas of religion, sexuality, and even philosophy in general. And on war, let's say, and money. Hence, the term political correctness in these areas. We all want to believe we have a lock on knowledge in these areas, but some more than others. For I have seen my observations now at age 62 is that those who allow for more uncertainty compensate in some other areas, and they have their own ways of coping with uncertainty. I might get into this a little bit here shortly. Another area, for some people, perhaps most people, the desire to live forever, either literally, through technological means, but moreover by religious means, either going to a heaven after death or the chance for a possible nirvana experience at one point through reincarnation over and over again. Ernest Becker wrote a book, for instance, and won a Pulitzer Prize for it, The Denial of Death. And Sheldon Solomon in Canada has picked up this theme also. They claim this is our number one problem, that we know we're going to die and we have a very hard time living with it, and try to cope either through a denial of death and a belief then in a heaven or reincarnation, or through leaving a legacy, whether it's a great artwork, lots of money to charities, building of libraries with our name on it, or what have you, to live on in memory and impact, hence the phrase to leave a dent on the universe, and thus live forever in some way, shape, or fashion. I believe, too, there are those who desire very much, crave very much, if suffering greatly in this life, or when they compare their level of suffering true or seemingly to some others, they desire what I call now a golden parachute, to make it all worthwhile after death somehow, with a equivalent of moving to Hawaii on your own island and your own jet and luxury food and slaves. Hence, a heaven lined with gold bricks that you walk on, and people waving fans to cool you, or the Islamic version of a certain number of virgins in heaven with you, in paradise. In other words, you have a raunchy job, say you call it, and you suffer, but you tell yourself it's all worthwhile because in a year you're going to go off on a 3-month cruise, and that will make it all worthwhile. The vacation package, the golden parachute cruise, as I call it. Now, I believe a lot of the problem in this respect is how we handle pain. If we feel ashamed of it, guilt-ridden over it, or regret it later, that's problematic. And secondly, if we compare ourselves with the Joneses, so to speak, and feel we've come up short and call this quote-unquote unfair, well, maybe we're comparing apples and oranges in my mind these days. Maybe we're saying it's unfair that so-and-so other human being has something we don't have. Maybe that's part of the problem. We're defining all of us as human beings of the same animal species. Maybe we're actually different species. Just like a mayfly would not deign or purport to call themselves anything else that lives much longer and say, oh, how unfair it is. Isn't that why then perhaps Dr. John Gray wrote this book, Men Are From Mars and Women Are From Venus? Maybe they're two different species entirely, and we shouldn't be saying so-and-so has a better and unfair existence. Well, if they're different species, how can you compare apples and oranges? Finally, many of us wish, I believe, to believe in free will, that we're self-determined, that we can make things happen in a vacuum, kind of like the theory that isn't true that fire can start by spontaneous combustion. We want, once again, magical thinking all too often, wishful thinking. Napoleon Hill warned much against this wishful thinking, by the way, in amongst other books or audiobooks, How to Control Your Own Mind. He said this is perhaps the number one affliction of mankind, in fact, wishful thinking, that we need to guard against it. Perhaps one last thought. I believe many of us desire, if not knowing something, while wishing to know it all, to fill in the gaps so that we have this feeling we once again do know everything, whether the material is true or not. Some might call this perhaps thinking prejudice, some might call it paranoia. I'm not really keen on these words, but at any rate, Chris Do has also talked of this on his Future channel, The Future, F-U-T-U-R. What we don't know, we desire to fill in the blanks on with something, kind of like a computer with a little box that needs to be checked before things can move on. It wants answers, whether true or false, so we can believe that we have a lock on knowledge and thus predictability about pain points in the future and how to avoid them with this so-called infinite source of knowledge. And, of course, to avoid pain so that we don't feel shame about the pain we incur in the future, or decrepitude even, or what they call sometimes a shortened physical lifespan. These are my thoughts then in whirlwind fashion. I hope some of them resonate with everyone else or some others. As to why, I believe these are the things we most crave in life to have. Some one thing, some a few things, perhaps some all of these things, and some in various degrees, each of their own.